Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Chiang. Hello, and thanks for coming back for another episode of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. This is going to be a sort of different kind of episode. It's more of a reflective episode. I'm not the kind of person who really talks about life-changing events. However, I will say that 2020 was a life-changing year. I think most of us would say the same. The pandemic created huge changes to the lives of people around the world. I remember at the first signs of the pandemic in China, I didn't really pay all that much attention because there were other virus breakouts in China, like SARS. I didn't think it would be something that would eventually affect the whole world. I even booked a cruise to Antarctica for December of 2020 and January 2020. I don't think it was until March of 2020 where those of us in the United States really thought that COVID would come to us directly. So born out of the pandemic were many changes, and there are many reasons why 2020 was a life-changing year for me. The first, of course, was the pandemic itself and what it did to the practice of medicine. In the beginning of 2020, I was contemplating leaving my hospital-based job and starting my own private practice. In fact, my plan was to end my job shortly before going to Antarctica because of limitations on my ability to use my vacation time. Then when the pandemic hit, it really made me rethink the idea of starting my own practice. I was truly thankful that I hadn't already quit my job and started that private practice. So I didn't have a lease to pay, I didn't have staff to support at a time where people were really staying home and most medical facilities were only open for emergencies. Elective surgery was stopped for several months. The pandemic caused a flurry of activity among physician Facebook groups. And at that time, I was holed up in my home and not really going out, so I found myself online a lot more. In this environment, Peter Kim had his vision of the first Leverage and Growth Virtual Summit. I had been following Peter Kim for many years already at that point, so I was on his email list and I joined the summit. Watching the speakers of the Leverage and Growth Summit was truly inspiring. I really had no idea how many physicians were doing so many different things, so many great pursuits outside of medicine. I had the inkling, of course, that there were some physicians that were at the forefront of creating new tech businesses or being part of new innovations. But I never personally heard any of them speak. I didn't really hear their backstory, and I had no idea how they got started. I didn't ever see the possibility of me being in that kind of role. And I know that there were physicians that invest in real estate. I personally had started investing in real estate when I was doing my MD PhD program. But I don't think I realized that there were actually physicians who were running syndications. I imagine physicians as being more the passive investor, the limited partners on syndication projects, not the general partner. I saw physicians as, owning, single family rental homes or vacation homes or duplexes or quadplexes, but not whole apartment complexes. I certainly didn't think about physicians as becoming venture capitalists with their own venture capital fundraising firms. And the Leverage and Growth Virtual Summit was also the first time I heard about coaching as something for physicians. Of course, I knew about coaches for sports. I played volleyball in high school and college. And I had heard about executive coaching for the corporate world, something that people in the C-suite got. But I never heard of physician coaches or the idea of physicians getting coaching. After the Leverage and Growth Summit, there were a lot of people who wanted to continue with the momentum that the summit had built. I became one of the founding members of what's now called LGA, Leverage and Growth Accelerators. Initially, I would say that I was kind of a wallflower. I was happy to help doing any organizational work, but there was definitely a bit of imposter syndrome since I myself felt like I was just a doctor. Yes, I said that, just a doctor. I don't use that word just much because of its connotation of less than. But compared to these doctors who are doing so much more than seeing patients, I did feel less than. Again, I had done real estate investing in the past, and I had aspirations of doing it again after completing medical training, but I just hadn't pulled the trigger. I had started looking for investment properties, but I just didn't find any deals that were like what I found when I was first investing. I remember Sunny Smith offering EWP in the summer of 2020 for $5,000. I didn't take the leap back then. Instead, I joined Zero to Freedom so that I could get a kickstart to get back into real estate investing. And I also started doing Self-Coaching Scholars, which is Brooke Castillo's program. By fall of 2020, I had purchased 5 doors of long-term investment property, as well as started coach certification in the Life Coach School. That's how these things happen, just step by step. Momentum, creating momentum. By the end of 2020, I had decided that I would start my own life coach business. So when I look back on 2020, I really see the pandemic as a gift. I also really see that the Leverage and Growth Summit was a turning point in my life. It was the first step of many steps that actually led to where I am now. 5 years ago, I could never have guessed that I'd be living the life I have now. I wouldn't have said during the time of the Leverage and Growth Summit that I felt like it was a turning point in my life. I think there are some people who recognize when they may be at a turning point. For me, life changes just seem to come on a little bit more gradually. One thing that leads to another, that leads to a different decision than I would have made before, that opens up an opportunity, which is how change happens and growth begins. This is kind of a long way of saying that you never know when an event can change your life until you look back. And that's why we have that saying, that hindsight is 2020. So when you get a bad result, give yourself the grace that you made the best decision you could with the information and resources that you had at the time you made the decision. You couldn't possibly know the future consequences or events that occur. And sometimes what seems really grim can turn into a blessing. Up until 2020, I actually associate with very few physicians outside of the workplace. Now I feel like I have a lot of personal connections with people who are physicians. I also feel more connected to the physician community as a whole. While I was a member of PMG prior to the pandemic, I really was never active there because I'm not a mother, so I didn't really feel like I belonged in that space. Since then, I've actually gotten a chance to talk to Hala Sabri herself, and she openly welcomed me to be active in PMG even though I'm not a mother, with the caveat that I don't tell other people how to parent, which I really would not do. And now I've met people that I followed for years. Peter Kim of Passive Income MD, Lee Dalin, the physician on fire, Jim Dahl of the White Coat Investor, and Jimmy Turner, the physician philosopher. It's amazing to me that I've actually met these people in person, these people who I thought were so famous and totally out of my reach. These were people who I discovered through my desire to reach financial independence as soon as possible when I made that decision back when I was a graduate student. And now these are literally people that I've had dinner with. And I also realized that these people are really not that different from me, that I actually could have a similar role and really be an agent for change. It's all about just having a voice. I remember when I was reading the different blogs on White Coat Investor and Passive Income MD and Physician on Fire, that it didn't even occur to me that I had my own voice and that I could be writing blogs and that people would want to hear what I have to say. I think that's so different now. While I might not really be writing a blog, I am using my voice for this podcast to spread my own ideas. It used to be that I thought, well, I don't really have anything to add to the conversation. But now I realize that each one of us have our own voice, our own way of saying things, our own perspective on things. And there's room for multiple perspectives. And there are different ways that people say things that will reach different people. So what really prompted me to record this episode is that the Leverage and Growth Virtual Summit is right around the corner. This year, it will be on March 15th to the 19th, with registration opening on March 1st. Registration is free and anyone can participate at no cost. The VIP All Access Pass is $97 up until March 14th. Then the price increase once the summit begins to $197 during the time of the conference. After the conference ends, there's one more price hike and it goes up to $297. So I would go ahead and just buy the $97 now. I did that way back in 2020, and I think it's well worthwhile. By having the All Access Pass, you get Q&A time with different speakers, as well as lifetime access to the recordings. Well, I say lifetime, but longer term access to the recordings. If you do the free registration, then I think you get to listen to the recordings for about 24 hours after they go up. The summit features over 30 physicians who share what they are doing outside of practicing medicine. And I always find the stories of these physicians, totally inspiring. And really, like I said, an example of what's possible for any of us, that these people are not actually that different from you and I. As I say that, I realize that you may think that I'm actually really different from you, but really, it wasn't that long ago that I felt the same way about these same people. And now, like I said, there are people that I actually consider colleagues that I could actually contact to ask for advice. And really, they're there for you too. That's one of the great things about the physician community. In general, physicians want to help people. That's why we became physicians. And of course, we want to help our own people, our peers. Each year the summit comes up, it makes me pause and reflect on where my life is now and how different it is from the life that I actually thought I would have. And I also think about, where do I want to go? It used to be that the sky was the limit, and now I've heard that the sky is only the beginning. How has your life changed since 2020? Has it been for the better or for the worse? Have you found yourself in burnout from the added stress of the pandemic? Or have you started to see how the world of medicine is changing, for good and for bad, but how doctors are breaking free and finding their own path? I do hope it's the latter. The Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast was born from the dream of physicians achieving financial freedom, which would allow us to work because we want to, and to be able to create work situations where we feel valued, where we can serve while feeling whole and not feeling depleted. We physicians can change how medicine is practiced. I do have an affiliate link to register for the Leverage and Growth Virtual Summit in the show notes. Using my affiliate link helps support the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. As you know, it takes money to produce a podcast, which I hope this podcast is bringing a lot of value to you. So thanks so much for using my affiliate link if you do sign up for the Leverage and Growth Summit. I really want to encourage you to take some action. One action is listening to this podcast so that you can increase your financial literacy. But if all you do is listen, then that's not going to change your life in any way. I hope you're applying some of the things that you're learning here so that you can grow your wealth. I hope you are starting to dream about what life could be. What does your ideal life look like? And how can you make every day closer to that ideal life? I really invite you to come to the Leverage and Growth Virtual Summit and not compare yourself to the speakers for how much they've done and how much you may or may not have accomplished, but just to realize that any of this is possible. It's possible for you. It truly is. Physicians are among the smartest people, but also people with the biggest hearts. That's why we went into this profession. It's also why we often have a hard time charging, because we want to give freely. What I want to offer you is that money comes from value, and we put so much value out. So I want to encourage you to grow your wealth and do it by serving and putting great value out into the world, however that looks like to you. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with another episode of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.